Welcome to Homebrew by J.W. Martin Real Estate, where we uncover the true stories of what's brewing in South Carolina's local business scene. I'm Joey Martin, and each week we sit down with the ones who are pushing through the grind. Business owners, creators, and community leaders who have fought through the tough times and come out stronger. No fluff, just real stories, smart insights, and a whole lot of lessons learned the hard way. Let's dive in. Really excited to have our guest, Matt Green, today. Matt Green is the founder and president of Ledger Medial Accounting Services in Greenville. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt.
Hey, Joey, I appreciate you having me on. You want my whole life story from birth till now, or you just want the overview?
Give us the overview.
I'm 48 years old. I am from the Greenville area for the most part, but how I got here in the whole accounting world was a little different. I coming out of high school 100 years ago, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was play music. Me and a guy, this has been 95, wanted to start a band. I played guitar, ready to roll, never could find a drummer. I tinkered around on some drums. I was like, I'll just learn to play drums. And I actually did it. So a couple years later, we were playing in the bands, playing our band in the upstate. We played North Carolina, South Carolina, Charleston, a few places. I would say we had a success in many ways other than monetarily, but that kind of fizzled out. 2003, I moved to Nashville and went to school for audio engineering, and I did very well. I could have gone that route, but I met my wife in 2004.
Yeah.
She had two little kids. They are not little now. They're 28 and almost 27. And we had a daughter together in 2008. So wound up moving back to Greenville 2009. So the quick answer is I moved to Nashville with 0 kids in 2003, moved back in 2009, I had 3. So I had to do something.
Yep.
I did release an album. It's the last Hoorah, and it sold about 15 copies worldwide. So I couldn't really retire on that.
That's
so, yeah. So one day in May of 2012, we were on the back deck, just me and my wife discussing our future. I said, just popped in my head. I said, I'll go back to school and become an accountant. August 12th, 2012, I started doing that. I started my first classes. All in all, I took 56 classes to get my bachelor's in accounting, MBA, concentration in accounting, and then I worked for a CPA firm for about 5 years from 4.5 years, 2016 to 2020. And got my enrolled agent's license August 13th. I started this company, 2020, during COVID. I built it totally virtually here, and here I am.
Wow, that's a pretty cool story. And what a unique kind of story from music to accounting, because usually the two personality types are on one side of the spectrum to the other. As far as usually the artsy musician is not numbers oriented or detail oriented. And so that's breaking the mold there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would think so. And truthfully, I picked accounting because music was the most unstructured career path, and accounting was the most structured career path I could think of. And yeah, I've always been an outside the box thinker. And ironically, like one of my first few days of an accounting job, my boss told me, you got to think outside the box. I was like, all this time I'm trying to learn a way to be inside the box for the first time in my life. And that's one of the first things I'm told as an accountant. That's just funny.
That is pretty crazy. Yeah. And I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, you get so focused in the everyday grind and everyday hustle, you just kind of put the blinders on and just go make money. And as long as there's money in the bank account, you think everything's fine, but couldn't be more wrong. Sometimes you got to be watching your numbers at all times. You need to know where your business is at all times. I've personally found myself in some pretty tough positions early on owning my business, just creating different LLCs and things like that, and just not knowing how to structure things properly, and having someone that can help guide you and provide that knowledge and guidance. Is that the kind of thing that you do, Matt?
Yeah, we do that. We file taxes for anybody who basically needs to file their taxes. We do bookkeeping. But yes, we help people with their entity structure, whether it's somebody just wants to get started with a business or they've been in business for a while and they're making more money and they want to get a grasp on that. But we do register LLCs. We're not attorneys. We don't do operating or partnership agreements or any kind of stock issuances or anything like that. We have an attorney we work with fairly regularly that helps us or helps our clients with that. But
Okay.
I think one of the biggest, like even with AI, you can go in and ask it what you want to know, and it's going to tell you what the whole internet says in a summary.
Right.
The most confusing thing is and I finally figured out how to say this after years, an LLC can be anything. That's what's so confusing. An LLC can be a sole proprietor. It can be a partnership. It can be a C-Corp. It can be an S-Corp. And I think that's what really confuses people. And if I were to give any advice, and when you go and you say, how do you start a business, and the internet gives you 5 billion things to read. Really, if you don't know what else to do, you set up an LLC, you get an EIN, you go to a bank, you open up a separate bank account, and you use it just for business. You now have about 90% of an accounting system in place. At least 5 years ago, I took $100 to Bank of TR and opened a bank account, and it's cost me $0 cents. And it just simplifies everything.
That simplifies it very much, because that's something I struggled with myself. Because when you go on the internet, you try to do a little self-learning, self-teaching. You see some people say LLC, some people say you need a C Corp, some people say you need an S Corp. It's just so confusing as to what direction to go. You just kind of get stuck sometimes and just don't know who to ask for advice. So I'm glad you pointed that out. And so Joe, business owner, is out here, and my world is real estate. If you're a real estate agent and you're looking to structure your business, because real estate's a very entrepreneurial business, individual agents are usually 1099 contractors for the brokerage. Many, I would say, probably most haven't gone through and set up that structure accurately to where they have an LLC in place and they've gone to get a separate bank account and have their expenses strictly for the business going through that to that debit card or credit card or both, whatever the case may be. Yeah. So I personally can't express the importance of doing that very early on. Do it from the start, because if you don't, you'll, like myself, I wound up just from sheer ignorance. I was driven, successful, but just didn't have much business acumen very early on, and learned through things the hard way to certainly overcome it by now. But it's much easier to learn from the mistakes of others than to have to make those mistakes yourself. What do you think, Matt, with for instance, a real estate professional or someone just looking to go start a pressure washing business or something like that? What kind of structures do you see most beneficial?
That's funny. Both of my sons have or had a pressure washing business. Yeah, I would just say always the LLC. And then more importantly is, if you're a single member LLC, you're still a sole proprietor for tax purposes. And I say that to say, a lot of people think you have to have an LLC to write off business expenses. That's not accurate. If you go do DoorDash one night and you get a 1099 for $40, or you have $1 million roofing company, if you go and you set up a single member LLC, you're still a sole proprietor just the same. But one thing that does, in addition to allowing you to pretty much create a large portion of an accounting system, you just go through your bank statements, add up your expenses and everything at the end of the year or whenever, but it establishes a date. So real estate agents, from what I see, I don't have a percentage, but maybe a tenth of them become successful to the point where it may make sense to convert to an S corporation. And the thing is, let's say you go out today, you become a real estate agent, you set up an LLC, you got everything structured, and then you make it through the end of the year. But next year, you get to June or July and you're like, man, I'm making a bunch of money. What do I do? So now you've got that date established. So basically an S corporation is more or less just a tax election on an LLC. And what it does, it eliminates self-employment tax. And really what self-employment tax is, if you're a W-2 employer or an employee, wherever you work, you'll get your pay stub or your W-2 and you're going to see 6.2% Social Security, 1.45 Medicare taken out of your check. That's 7.65%. What you don't see is your employer is paying another half. So that's 15.3%. So when you file as a sole proprietor on your personal taxes, Schedule C, you're paying a whole additional tax, whole another tax on top of the tax you're paying, self-employment tax on the net income of the business. So
Okay.
an S corporation completely eliminates that. So let's say that what I'm saying, like next June, this person set up an LLC. They're like, oh no, I made all this money. You can actually retro back and be an S corporation for all of 26 and
Wow.
eliminate self-employment tax. There's some rules, there's some added expenses, but generally, if you're not owning real estate and you're not taking on more than 100 investors, you're ultimately going to want to move into from an LLC, still be an LLC, but at tax election as an S corporation.
Once
It's
you,
that simple. I don't know if that
okay.
sounds simple, but maybe it's because I do it all day, but it's really that simple.
Yeah, I prefer it simple, man. The more simple, the better. So starting as an LLC until you get to a certain level of success and then maybe transforming into an S-Corp.
Right.
Very nice, simple way to break it down. A term that I've heard thrown around a lot as you float around YouTube shorts and Facebook reels and little things like that. The term outsourced CFO, used a little carelessly. You want to speak on that a little bit?
Here's my opinion on that. If I were to ask you, what do you think an outsourced CFO does?
I would probably think that would be a chief financial officer for a business that's not quite big enough to have one yet, but or maybe can't afford one yet, and maybe wants to hire one on a part-time basis, maybe.
And that's right. But during COVID, it seems like everybody and their brother started a bookkeeping business, and the people that were already bookkeepers started calling themselves CFOs. And I know some people that are brilliant and they do outsource CFO, and I don't ever label us that. I've always had the mindset that we're going to do that and offer that, but I just wouldn't want to call it that because it's just so saturated. But the thing is, like when I have discussions with these people, we agree that it's almost impossible to explain what you actually do for these people because what they need is so broad. I mean, do they need someone helping them get capital? Do they need someone that's going to do cash forecasting? Or a lot of what people really need is, they just want someone to look at their numbers with them. They need accurate information. And in a big company, I just know this because I know some people that work at very large companies in management roles, and they work with CFOs. They have Zoom monthly calls or quarterly calls. So really, just in the accounting world, you have an accountant, which is the person that, does the journal entries, assembles everything. You have a controller that's over the whole accounting department, which a controller's job is really just to make sure they're creating accurate financial information, balance sheet, profit and loss, cash flow statement. These are like big companies. A lot of times a CFO is really just a controller that's been promoted to that position. But a CFO really is just forward thinking. They're looking at where you've been and they're just predicting where you're going to go. And that could be a whole bunch of different things. So really it's just a matter of accountability. And maybe you schedule a meeting with your client and you're looking at where they are, you're looking at their numbers, and then maybe you need to do a cash flow projection or some kind of what if scenario, or maybe they're looking to sell. And I just feel like that gets thrown out because you're going to have the controller aspect. You got to have the accurate information. And I just feel like everybody claims to be a CFO, and I think it's unfair that you could just any, meeny, miny, mo, pick somebody and maybe they could charge you $500 a month. Someone would charge $5,000 a month. And you may not need anything more than just someone to look at your numbers because your wife doesn't want to hear about your business. It's already consuming your whole life. So It's just an outside person to help you. I don't know if that makes sense. I just think we're moving towards something that I have a name for that is different. And I don't want to call it CFO, but really they just want to be guided. They want to talk about their numbers, and it's just hard. So my problem is just the complexity in packaging it. And it's actually unfair to the people that do offer CFO services are brilliant at it. That's all. That's my rant about that.
I think I understand what you're saying there is that folks that may not be qualified to throw that label around or throwing it around. And I'm sure there's a handful that are the exception to the rule that really deserve that label. But a lot of folks offering bookkeeping are labeling themselves CFOs and presenting themselves as such. And when I think as an entrepreneur, if you hire a CFO, you're thinking you really got your hands on something important. You really got your hands on somebody who's going to show you the way. And that may not be the case with some of these folks claiming that. And but I like what you're saying there is that's certainly as an entrepreneur myself, I agree. Like sometimes you're wondering, like, who do I reach out to that's going to give me advice about this? And oftentimes, you get with the local CPA and they're so busy, it's difficult to get any time with them. And even if you have time with them, you don't know what questions to ask. And so just offering the guidance like you're talking about, I think that's a huge benefit. Yeah, without question.
Yeah. And a lot of CFOs don't, or most, probably almost all, don't do any kind of tax planning, which really is most people can see if they got more money this month than they did last month. That's not the way to go about it. But what I've seen people get paralyzed by is owing 10, 15 times more in taxes than they think they're going to owe.
Yeah.
So really that's a big part of that. I just think it's a very separate thing. I would say CFO and tax planning, but to me, they should coincide. I would think if you're going to work with smaller companies, that's just my opinion on that.
Yeah. How about the term tax strategist? Would that kind of coincide with tax planning?
Yeah, tax planning, tax strategist. I would say that's what we offer. We get asked, hey, do we do CFO services? We've had people that go and pay people 3 times what they're paying us to hire someone as CFO, and they really don't do anything different. They come back. But yeah, I would say that's, there is tax strategy. I mean, the way you're going to save taxes, chunks of taxes is 3 ways: through entity structure. The second would be timing and purchasing of major assets. And the third would be retirement contributions. There's other little things, but for the most part, those are really the 3 ways. So there's strategy and there's planning. I mean, we have a granite company, it might make sense for them to buy an $80,000 CNC machine this year, or it might make more sense to do it next year. Then that could significantly alter their entire financial world for the next 10 years on when they make that decision.
Yeah.
There's always strategy, planning and strategy. I'd say planning means, I guess, you're planning to pay it. Strategy means you're trying to get out of paying it.
Tax avoidance strategies. Yep.
Right.
I understand. Matt, I really have enjoyed the conversation here. Before we go here, the current state of the IRS, and is there anything that you feel like business owners should know about the current state of the IRS?
I think they're on their 7th chairman in roughly a year, meaning the person that runs the whole IRS. So,
wow.
I feel like DOGE is, some people think they're trying to eliminate the IRS totally, which obviously doesn't make any sense. And, but they have laid off 40,000 plus people. One thing we do is I do represent people, and sometimes I'll be on the phone with the IRS agent, sometimes 3 or 4 hours. So I kind of know them, and they're saying more is coming. If I were to say anything, avoid paper filing anything to the IRS. If you send something into the IRS by actual paper, I cannot give you any kind of time limit on when they're actually going to process it. It could be 3 weeks. It could be a year and a half, 2 years. It's just the brutal truth.
Yeah, I guess with 40,000 layoffs, it's workload is probably spread a little thin, I would imagine.
Yes, but it's worse than they obviously want people to know. We have a client literally just got a notice last week that the IRS sent them, and it says, we have record of receiving your tax return, but we lost it. Can you please fax it to this number? So they lost they're admitting to losing their tax return, which is, I've never seen that before.
Right.
At least they're honest, I guess.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Matt, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. If any one of our listeners is seeking some help from someone like you, where can they find you?
Just Google Ledger Medial. We're everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, ledgermedial.com, pretty much anywhere.
All right. Ledger Medial. All right, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And thank you for helping small businesses and entrepreneurs. That's what it's all about, man. And thanks for being on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's it for this episode of Homebrew. If it resonated with you or gave you a fresh perspective, share it with someone else who's working hard to make their mark. Subscribe, stay curious, and remember, no matter the challenge, keep pushing forward because success is brewed one step at a time. We'll see you next time. Same place, new story.